The story begins in chaos. CloudKitchens, the company that promised to revolutionize the way we eat, was collapsing. Kitchens were filthy. Workers were exhausted and overworked. Orders were late. Meals were spoiled. Customers were furious. Complaints poured in from every corner of the city, and regulators started showing up unannounced, shaking their heads in disbelief. At the center of it all was Travis Kalanick, the man who had changed the world with Uber, who had defied governments, taxi unions, and industry norms, was now trying to conquer food. After being forced out of Uber in 2017, Kalanick was determined to prove he was unstoppable. This was supposed to be his second act, a new empire that would cement his reputation as a visionary entrepreneur. That empire had a name: CloudKitchens. The idea seemed simple and brilliant. Restaurants no longer needed expensive storefronts in prime locations. Instead, they could operate out of hidden delivery-only kitchens. Food would reach customers through apps, and the company could scale quickly without the overhead of traditional restaurants. Investors were excited. Analysts praised the vision. Kalanick was back in the headlines, this time promising to revolutionize an industry worth hundreds of billions. But underneath the shiny press releases and big promises, a different story was unfolding. Inside CloudKitchens, conditions were terrible. Workers described a culture of fear, exhaustion, and relentless pressure. Kitchens were overcrowded. Refrigerators and freezers often broke down and were left unrepaired. Food safety regulations were ignored. Raw meat was sometimes stored next to cooked meals. Employees called in sick, but managers pushed them to keep working, telling them that delays would ruin the company's growth. Kalanick's leadership style from Uber had followed him into this new venture. Move fast and break things had worked in tech, but in kitchens it became dangerous. Profit was prioritized over people. Speed was valued over safety. Ambition overshadowed common sense. The company expanded rapidly, buying warehouse after warehouse, leasing dozens of locations, and promising investors that CloudKitchens would dominate the food delivery market. Yet the growth was rushed, and the foundations were weak. Kitchens were under-equipped, staff were barely trained. Health inspectors started noticing violations, and complaints began piling up. Employees leaked information about unsafe working conditions. Former workers later described scenes that sounded more like a factory than a kitchen. "It felt like we were disposable," one said. "If you couldn't keep up, you were out. It didn't matter how hard you tried. The business came first, always." Even restaurants partnering with CloudKitchens began to see problems. Many were promised higher efficiency and lower costs. In reality, they were getting delayed orders, poor quality meals, and angry customers, blaming them for mistakes they didn't even control. Small restaurant owners found themselves trapped in a system that seemed designed to fail. By 2021, the cracks were impossible to hide. Customers posted spoiled meals online. Social media exploded with stories of unsafe food and missing orders and long delays. Investors began asking questions. How could a company with billions in funding struggle to run kitchens safely? Where was the technology that was supposed to solve every problem? The truth was clear. CloudKitchens had focused on growth at all costs and neglected the people and processes needed to sustain it. The human cost was immense. Employees suffered from stress, exhaustion, and sometimes physical injury due to unsafe working conditions. Restaurant owners lost customers and reputation. Delivery customers faced contaminated or delayed meals. And Kalanick, sitting at the top, seemed untouchable. Billions of dollars had been poured into the company, and yet the basic operations were failing. Travis Kalanick had thought his experience with Uber would translate directly to success in another industry. He believed that charisma, ambition, and a network of investors were enough to build another empire. But CloudKitchens revealed the limits of ego-driven leadership. Vision alone could not fix broken processes or unsafe practices. Without careful management and concern for the people executing the work, even brilliant ideas could collapse. The company's internal problems were mirrored externally. Health departments issued warnings. Lawsuits began to mount. Investors questioned their blind faith in Kalanick's promises. Employees continued to quit, exhausted or disillusioned. The future of food delivery was turning into a cautionary tale about ambition unchecked by responsibility. Former employees painted a picture of a toxic culture. Managers encouraged speed at the expense of safety. Employees were seen as disposable. One worker described it as, "You were a number. If you couldn't keep up, you didn't exist. It didn't matter how much effort you put in." Workers' voices were ignored, safety standards overlooked, and mistakes hidden from regulators until they became crises. Despite the failure of operations, Kalanick's vision kept pushing the company forward. Warehouses were bought and leased aggressively. Expansion was prioritized over safety. Growth targets became more important than food quality or employee well-being. In the race to dominate the market, common sense had disappeared. CloudKitchens became a symbol of hubris. Travis Kalanick, once hailed as a genius, was now a cautionary example of what happens when ego drives decisions. He had changed an industry with Uber, but in his second act, ambition overshadowed responsibility, and the results were disastrous. The aftermath was messy and far-reaching. Employees were left without support. Restaurants suffered damage to their reputations, and investors counted losses that ran into hundreds of millions. Lawsuits over labor violations, safety breaches, and employee mistreatment began to pile up. CloudKitchens, once the darling of tech investors, was now synonymous with failure. Yet Kalanick remained a figure of fascination. To some, he was still a visionary entrepreneur. To others, he was a man who allowed ego to destroy everything he touched after Uber. His second act, intended to prove his genius, instead became a warning about unchecked ambition and poor management. The collapse of CloudKitchens also sent ripples through the broader tech and food industries. Startups and investors learned a lesson. Growth cannot replace operational integrity. A charismatic leader cannot hide unsafe practices or neglected employees. The human cost, workers suffering, restaurants struggling, and customers at risk, was too high a price for ambition alone. CloudKitchens still exists in a smaller form today. Some kitchens operate under stricter safety standards. Expansion has slowed, but the shadow of Kalanick's hubris remains. The company will forever be remembered, not for innovation but for the lessons it left behind about the dangers of ego, overexpansion, and profit-driven culture. The story of CloudKitchens teaches that success in one industry does not guarantee success in another. Leadership requires more than vision. It requires accountability, care for people, and respect for the rules that protect them. Without these, even the most brilliant minds can cause real harm. Employees learned harsh lessons about working for a charismatic leader. Investors learned that money cannot substitute for careful management. Customers learned that convenience should never come at the expense of safety. And Travis Kalanick learned, or at least the world hopes he learned, that ambition without responsibility can lead to disaster. In the end, CloudKitchens is more than a failed company. It is a story of ambition, failure, and the real consequences of ignoring human cost. It shows how quickly brilliance can turn into chaos when ego drives decisions and basic rules are ignored. Travis Kalanick's legacy is now complicated. He will always be remembered as the man who reshaped transportation. But he will also be remembered as the man who tried to reshape food delivery and failed spectacularly. CloudKitchens serves as a warning to entrepreneurs, investors, and everyone chasing the next big idea. Growth is important, but not at any cost. People matter. Safety matters. Reputation matters. If you want to understand the real story behind business empires and the people behind the headlines, make sure to subscribe. Stories like CloudKitchens are more than just headlines. They are lessons, warnings, and glimpses into the human cost of unchecked ambition. Because behind every flashy startup, behind every billion-dollar vision, there is a real world of people, rules, and risks. And sometimes, ignoring them can cost everything.